So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, part 3 and 4. And we had a lot of stuff happen in part 3 and 4. Nicole, your prediction was correct about who the Green Knight was. All right, so I didn't really have much of a poker face the other day when you said that. All right, so nonetheless, you were correct. So good picking up on the foreshadowing and all of that. Um, Did the Green Knight's identity surprise anybody after we kind of alluded to it the other day? And were any of you guys surprised?
No, but I was kind of shocked with the Lord's wife. But she was kind of suspicious. So I kind of was expecting her to be a part of the whole plan. But before that, I wasn't really.
You didn't see that plot twist coming.
No.
What makes you think so? Just because it was, you think it's because it was such a overly like sexual thing that happened, and that maybe that's surprising for work in this time period?
Probably, but really what made her suspicious was that she just kept like pushing on him. Like she wanted him to, you know, and he was like, no, I don't really want to do that. But she kept like pushing on it. So that kind of made her suspicious. I feel like if someone was like, no, I don't want to do that, then I'll just leave them alone and let it be. But she kept coming back.
Right. Very much felt like she was trying to prove something. Right. I agree with you there.
Hey, I'm thinking if he would have succumbed to her advances, he might have ended up dying in the end. I think that was like a test for him. He was almost like a Christ-like as far as his virtues and stuff. It seemed like he's the perfect man, which we all know doesn't exist. But
I agree. I found it really interesting the way that she was the promiscuous one and he was avoiding her advances. Because usually in literature, it's the men that are going after the women. And really, they played up to the, I guess, kind of demonization that women get sometimes in the Bible as being just overly promiscuous, untrustworthy snakes, pretty much.
yeah, I like that footnote about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I like that footnote where it brought up multiple recountings of the Bible, like Samson and David, and there was a few others relating to some of the women that had got over on men, I guess you could say. But they said that it was this is used as a anti-feminist movement in some cases.
Yeah, let's look at that passage. I'm glad you brought that up, Dale. That's on 274, right close to the end. Yeah, it's close to the bottom of 274. That's where we get this passage. It says, "No, forsooth," said the knight, seizing his helmet and doffing it with dignity as he delivered this thanks. "My stay has sufficed me. Still luck go with you. May he who bestows all good honor you with it. And commend me to the courteous lady, your comely wife. Indeed, my due regards to both dear ladies, who with their wanton wiles have thus waylaid their knight. But it is no marvel for a foolish man to be maddened thus and saddled with sorrow by the slights of women. Here on earth was Adam taken in by one, and Solomon by many such, and Samson likewise. Delilah led him to his doom, and David later still was blinded by Bathsheba and badly suffered for it. Since these were troubled by their tricks, it would be true joy to love them, but not believe them, if a lord could. For these were the finest of former times, most favored by fortune of all under the heavenly kingdom, whose hearts were abused. These four all fell to schemes of women whom they used. If I am snared, it seems I ought to be excused." All right, so that's classic misogynist type of passage in medieval and Renaissance lit. Right. Oftentimes, The story we're going to read for Wednesday is all about this, right? These classic medieval tales always sort of allude back to all the bad things women did in the Bible, right? And we're in classical literature, so here's a first good case of it that we're encountering in this class, right?
That's pretty funny, honestly, because it, like Adam wasn't at fault; it was all Eve.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Later in the class, when we read Paradise Lost, you'll actually get to hear Adam kind of shame Eve for tempting him after he decides to eat. So
I've always wanted to read that in Dante's Inferno.
yeah, it's definitely a good one. So we're going to be talking about this, especially Wednesday. We're going to be talking about this type of thing a lot. Medieval and Renaissance lit. It is full of misogyny of sorts, right? I've always said that it's something you can't really judge them for it by today's standards. Like you really can't. So I think sometimes lots of literature professors will be like, will look down on an old text for having views like this. Well, I mean that's just an entire culture's views at the time, right? We can't sort of look at another culture and through rose-colored glasses. If you guys, if you can kind of see what I mean here, that's always been my opinion, right?
Can I mention one thing on that?
Go right ahead.
The only thing is on that, it's a slippery slope because it is quite a gray area. Because does that excuse Rome for how they treated people and how America treated slaves just because they were a product of their time? Not necessarily.
Right. Well,
that's not nearly as severe as what you're talking about, though. So yeah, that's not lost on me.
Well, my answer to that, because I'm an American lit scholar by trade, right? But even my answer to that, when I teach the first half of American lit, when we talk about slavery, I do like to teach Southern writers, right, who were supportive of slavery, just so we can, if nothing else, we can understand their perspectives, right, and the reasons that they used and all that kind of stuff. Lots of times in a literature class like this one, those types of views will be, you just don't get them, right? So that's that's how I approach it. I like all the ugly stuff in history. I don't want to act like it didn't happen, right? That's how I've always approached it.
Yeah, not to get political, but I think it's one of the faults in our early education system is how we don't really teach how this country was founded, really.
Right.
I think it's interesting, especially when considering slavery. A lot of times people will assume that all white people at that time were slave owners. And really, if you think about it and you look back, mainly the rich people of that period were the ones that owned slaves. And the poor people, although definitely not exposed to as much trauma and as much abuse as Black people at that time, would not have had it as good as some people assume.
Right. Yeah, that's all the subject of another class, right? But that's very much true. I mean, even in the South in 1840, right, there was a lot of poor people, white people that didn't have slaves, right? So it was mostly the plantation owners.
I was also alluding to how we colonized this and did the Native Americans wrong. I feel like as a travesty, we don't really teach that properly.
No, high school history is very much an idealistic history. It's giving you a narrative, right? That America is the greatest thing ever, right? We never have done wrong, right? It's very much that type of spin narrative.
Yeah, I'm an American. I mean, I'm a patriot. I'm a veteran. I started in the military, but I can't. Yeah, I can't deny the sins of our past. There's no way around it.
I feel that the true patriots are the people that can see the country for what it is and can want better for it.
Right.
But back to what Kelsey was saying about being surprised and also being a little bit curious about the lady's role and everything. I had my suspicions about the lord of the castle that Gawain was staying at, but it really was cemented for me when she said, for twice I have tested you and twice have found you true. And then she goes on to say, the lady's longing to woo would not let her sleep, nor would she impair the purpose pitched in her heart on 1733 to 1734. And when she talked about not being able to reveal the purpose, that's when I kind of knew. I was like, yeah, this is a little bit more than that.
Right.
Yeah, that's around the area that I was like, she's a little suspicious.
I also thought it was interesting during that, a little bit before that, when she first enters, Gawain, like, he knows that she's there, but he acts really surprised, and it kind of alludes to doing that purely for appearances, being shocked and being like, oh, get away from me, sinful woman, on 1200 and 1203.
Is the lady we're talking about, is she the one that ends up being Morgan Le Fay? Is that her?
Morgan Le Fay is who gives the Green Knight his powers.
Okay, so she's separate from the one that was tempting him.
Yeah. That was the Green Knight's wife that was tempting him. But Lord Morgan Le Fay, who is King Arthur's half sister, that's who gives the Green Knight his powers. In Arthurian legends, she's often an antagonist to King Arthur, but sometimes not. Right? Sometimes not too. She's kind of a very gray figure. She's not always evil.
Yeah, I was wondering what their beef was.
Right. She doesn't like
Guinevere.
Yeah. Of course, Guinevere is another classic. We're talking about women and medieval women and archetypes and stuff. Guinevere is also a medieval woman that's often associated with promiscuity and things like that because of cheating with Lancelot. Right. Yeah, we talked about the Joseph Campbell hero story when we talked about Beowulf, right? We very much see that archetype within the story here, like the seductress type of figure. We didn't really get that with Beowulf, maybe the movie Beowulf, but we didn't really get it with the book. We definitely do here. Right? It's really interesting because we have this game afoot. Right, the Green Knight says, I'm going hunting, right? I will give you the gifts that I have at the end of the day. And you give back the gifts that you get here at the end of the day. So actually, it's kind of even got I'm going here. I mean, it actually even has kind of a homoerotic subtext to it as well, right? If Sir Gawain would have actually slept with her, right? Then he would have had to have repaid the debt to the Green Knight at the end of the day, and he does give back the kiss, right? So there is that. So yeah, that subtext is definitely here. I think we would be wrong if we skirted over it. As far as that alternative sexualities in the medieval era, right? That type of thing, of course, was there, but there wasn't like an identity at the time. Like nobody said, "I'm gay," right? I only like men, or I only like women. That really wasn't a thing until the 1800s. That's when those type of identities came up. Oftentimes, it was just called a sin, right? And that's what they left it at that. But it was that subtext is there, right? I don't know if any of you guys want to comment on this, if you thought about it when you were reading it. Did-
One thing, I don't know if it's necessarily connected to that, but in the first hunt sequence, it talks about the Lord's only, for the months of this close season, he's only hunting does and female deer, not male deer. And I don't know, that stood out to me, but I didn't really connect it to anything until you mentioned the threat of sexuality. Could that play into this somehow?
right.
It's on lines 1156 and 1157.
Yeah, I'm on the page here. It says the noble prince had expressly prohibited meddling with male deer in the months of close season. It's the exact opposite now, right? With hunters, like they will usually kill bucks, but not does, right? So I don't know why that they would have hunted the females instead of the males. I don't really know. That's an interesting point. I don't know why though. Does it have a deeper meaning with the sexuality subtext within the story? Arguably so, I would think. Right. This hunt, we're kind of skipping topic to topic here, but the hunt is definitely a key part of our reading for today. Right. You guys tell me what's going on with this hunt. How was the poem portraying nature during these hunting sequences?
I felt that throughout each sequence, there were three, that it got more progressively more difficult for the hunters in every one. Because first they're hunting the does, and it talks about the abundance of them. They were just getting them, laying them down left and right, just getting a bunch of them. And then you had the boar, which is a really difficult foe. I think it actually wounded someone, and it also wounded the dogs.
Right.
And then you get to the fox. And I don't think the fox was necessarily as difficult as the boar, and the fact that the boar was strong and that it was hard to fight. I think the fox was hard to find because it portrayed it as an elusive, almost evil creature.
Yeah, the cunning fox, right? The fox even gets a name in the poem, Renault, right? Going back to those classic fairy tales and things like that. Yeah, it's this. We talked the other day about nature. Sir Gawain goes out into nature and actually getting to the Green Palace. He has to fight ogres and wolves and all this type of stuff. Um, you guys, I don't know, do some of you guys maybe feel like this hunting sequence might still show this kingdom in disarray? Do you think that might be what's going on here? Or other thoughts on the hunting sequences? They're pretty curious just because they spend so much time talking about them here. I don't know if any of you guys haven't chimed in yet, want to interject here.
I didn't necessarily catch on to the disarray. Honestly, that's something that I feel like flew over my head. Like, I never got that throughout. One thing I did notice, it was interesting that Gawain never came across any people through his travels, and that you never really encounter any peasants or any farmers, which I suppose could be the disarray and kind of a lack in the kingdom.
Right.
But one thing that I really noticed with
Right.
with the hunts is that just as the hunts get more difficult as time goes on, the lady's advances get stronger.
Right.
Until at the very end, doesn't she come in naked?
Pretty much.
During the last time she visits him?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I read it as a see-through robe type of deal.
Yeah, she is very much unshameless, in this by the time we get to her third advance. Right.
But the Green Knight was involved in that. He said he put her up to it, and he knew about the girdle she had gave him. So
Right.
I would have been interested to get a little more insight into the conversation he had with her on that. You know, if she had any objection to it, or if she was just full on like, yeah, awesome.
I wonder what would have happened if he would have did sleep with her. Like, would the Lord got mad that if that he would have done it, even though he put him up to it. I just wonder that would he get mad afterwards at his wife and at the person for doing it.
I think he dies if he sleeps with her.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to disagree with that a little bit on the grounds of, you know, the girdle that she gave to him, because she claimed that that would protect him from any bodily harm from any hero. And upon reading that, I assumed that that's how the Green Knight was able to get his head chopped off and be completely fine. But if she would have been lying about that, then I suppose, yeah, he could have been killed if she was not truthful.
If she's in on it from the get-go, which it implies she very much so was, how do we know she gives him the girdle after he sleeps with her? You know what I mean? That was his reward for not sleeping with her, perhaps.
That's a good point too, definitely.
The way that I understood it, the girdle didn't have any powers really at all, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It was more of a a coat of armor, metaphorically, give him courage.
Yeah, it was the Green Knight's sort of restraint that just gave him the nick on the neck at the end. Right? The Green Knight had no desire to kill Sir Gawain. Right? He said, "I'll just give you a blow in return." We talked the other day about how curious it was that Sir Gawain gave a killing blow to begin with, right? But it's actually the Green Knight who holds back at the end. Yeah, going along with Jacob's thoughts. What do some of the rest of you guys think? If he would have bent and fell victim to the woman here, right? Or victim's probably a bad way of putting it, right? If he would have been seduced by her, do you think that he would have made it to the end? Nicole thinks no. Dale thinks yes. What do some of the rest of you guys think?
I kind of think that maybe him not following through on what she wanted showed a little bit of strength in him. Like, so maybe because he had the strength to go against her, that he would have had the strength in the end. So maybe if he didn't, like, if he would have followed through with what she wanted, then yeah, he probably would have not made it in the end. That's
Right.
kind of like how I took it.
Right. So the strength just isn't in killing monsters and all this stuff, right? The strength is also in being a moral exemplar, right? That seems to be where you're going with that, Kelsey.
Right. Like, because he had the strength to not take up on the temptations, then he was going to have the strength to be able to fight against any, like, whatever else came.
Right.
I think that a point that isn't illuminated enough is his strength in this, because you have to think he was sort of resigned to death. You know, he knew that he assumed that he was going to have to take an equal blow to what he gave. And, you know, having assumed that, I think that any other normal man, honestly, I might have a little biased view on men, but I think any other man knowing, hey, I'm going to die after this, what's the harm in sleeping with her? That's something that I got. I thought that it was really definitely showed his virtues in not doing that.
I don't consider you biased right there. I consider you realistic.
Yeah, like I'm like most men probably would have thought, well, I'm gonna die anyways, might as well have fun before I do, you know? So it definitely showed that he was a virtuous man.
Right. So all those passages we got earlier about his Christian armor and all this type of stuff, right? I guess to show that it's not just a literal armor, right? It's also very much a metaphorical one. Right? I think Kelsey's spot on here about the purpose of those passages.
I'd like to hear what y'all think, because after I got done reading this, I thought about it, and I think this tale was used as a way to teach. It was a lesson to kids about how you're quote unquote supposed to carry yourself. You know what I mean? I'm sure this was passed around quite. I'm sure everybody was familiar with it.
Yeah,
I agree.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I don't know if it stood out to you all, but the passage where right before he leaves to go face the Green Knight, he goes and kind of absolves himself to the priest and attends mass and I guess confesses everything. I think that can definitely play into that. And I think this, in that day, in that era, would have been a testament to the rewards that you get from upholding Christ-like values.
Right. Even as far as like how men deal with women, right? You know, this poem plays a lot on the courtly love sort of tradition, right? That was part of medieval lit. Courtly love is all about that, right? It's not a chivalry and stuff, right? It's not a you don't like fall, you don't get involved, right? You show love towards women without sex getting involved, right? So oftentimes you'll show they'll have these knight figures and they're the woman that they're wooing, right? But that's all they do, right? They just show love and respect to the woman without sex getting involved in the picture. So that's definitely kind of what we see Sir Gawain doing here with with her. It's this I mean, this kind of thing, even today, we can argue: is that value still here? Right? Maybe not. Right? But in the Middle Ages, that was a code of chivalry and a code of honor that men had.
Do you think that the reason? Do you think the reason why he didn't do the one was for had slept with the woman was for his religious purpose, or do you think it was for the out of respect for the Lord who let him stay and welcomed him and is helping him and stuff? Do you think it was more of a religion thing and honoring God, or do you think it was more of a respect for how the Lord treated him while he was there? Because he was welcomed like he was very special and all and everything. So I was curious to wonder what was the reason why. Was it because of the Lord? Was it because of his religion, or maybe both?
I think both, because I think that if you are a Christian, then you believe that adultery is bad, like you shouldn't sleep with someone else's wife or husband. And so I think that his religion definitely played a huge role in that, and also his respect for the Lord.
I agree. I think that both play a big role in his choice to abstain from that, because every time the woman advances on him, it's always God save you, like you shouldn't do this and this, but he doesn't go so far as to shame her, which I thought was very interesting. He still showed that platonic affection without going deeper into it, and even the fact that he showed platonic affection towards the Lord made me feel almost a lot of security in his masculinity, because a lot of men today, reject affection towards others unless it is strictly sexual. That's something that I thought was very interesting about this piece.
Right. I would build off what you guys said and said there's even respect for her too, right? Just because she's throwing herself at him, but he still I don't think it's just respect for her husband, right? I think he also has the respect for her. I think that's part of why he doesn't do it. That's part of this courtly love angle that we have going on here.
I think that could also be why he was so angry when the whole plot was kind of made clear to him. He thought, I was so respectful to you and your wife, and I didn't allow her to sin, and then you all just had this plot set up the whole time and everything.
Right. I don't know, Jacob, what do you think now that we've talked about it? What do you think about your question asked?
What do I do think when I first read, I did think it was both. I was just curious to see what people thought was more, what it was more of. I didn't really think about, I'm gonna be honest, the respect of the woman kind of thing. So that's kind of interesting. I just wondered what played more of a role, was the Lord, respect for the Lord, or his religion. But I assumed that they was about equal.
Now, Nicole, you said that you think that this courtly love thing doesn't really happen much, platonic type of love between man and women these days, right? You want to elaborate more on that? Just because I think it's a useful question for applying the story to today.
Yeah, I don't mind to elaborate. I feel that, the friends that I have a lot, especially, just the way that relationships play out a lot in today's world and in today's culture and today's society. It's assumed that any relationship that two people have together is mainly going to be sexual, unless they are heterosexual and that relationship is with someone of the same sex. And I feel like a lot of times, when you're in a relationship, your significant other will not want you to be close with someone else because, they assume, well, if you have sexual relations with me and if you have that kind of attraction and that kind of affection with me, what's to stop you from having that with someone else, especially if it's another man or another woman, depending.
Right. It's that old adage that men and women can't be friends, right, without that getting involved. However one feels about that, right? That's still a question that we're debating today, right?
Another point that I could add to that is look at how the majority of men, view the friend zone. A lot of times it's automatically assumed that if a woman shows any kind of kindness or interest to you, then that's a sexual advance. And in the odd case that it's not, then you've been friend zoned. And that's always a negative aspect. And it comes secondly to meeting someone and to making acquaintance with someone. I feel like a lot of times men always assume first, oh, they want to date me or be with me. And then it's like, oh, wait, their second thought is maybe they just want to be friends.
I would caution against generalizations, though, on a whole. That's not indicative of all men. I get what you're saying. It is true in quite a few situations.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue that lots of men don't think that way, I think, but not all do, of course, right? But many do. You can't deny that, right? I don't know. Other thoughts on this question about the relationship? Can platonic relationships exist between men and women, do you think? So we haven't heard from a couple of you guys. Haven't heard from Kara, Leah, or Hannah yet. I don't know if any of you guys want to chime in here. Or on another question, perhaps.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Do you think that, because you see the number like 3 used a lot in this story, like for the 3 swings, the the 3 nights of him staying, the 3 hunting, 3 days of temptation, do you think that was more because of where, though back in religion was looked like that, like that's like a big deal? Do you think that it was in reputation of like the 3 days of how Jesus was on the cross, like how 3 days of, Jesus after he died, resurrected and stuff? Do you think that that played a big role in why the number was always 3 in the story?
I would say it for sure does. That's a common thing with Christianity is the number 3. You've got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is often referred to as the Godhead. It takes 3.
That's the exact point I was going to make. I couldn't agree more. I think that that is very elusive to the Trinity and the whole blanket of Christianity that is woven into this text.
Yeah, this type of thing still is prominent today too, right? You guys have probably heard. I can only speak for myself as a writing teacher, right? And oftentimes you might have heard a teacher tell you before when you're writing something, like if you're having a list, like 3 is always a good place to end, right? Or you have 3 body paragraphs in an essay, right? You probably heard that before, right? So this notion of 3, right, coming from Christianity, right? It's a big part of almost anything we do today. I guess can probably think of other examples too, besides writing. That's what my mind goes to.
I honestly never thought it like transcended just so far to affect the 3 paragraphs usually in a body of an essay.
To add to that, you have 3 stages of education in America. You have your elementary, middle, and high school, which are usually what people, what everybody kind of goes through. And then you have higher education optional, as in college and whatnot.
Isn't grief in 3 stages too? 3 stages of grief. So
yeah, I can't. What is it? Is it denial, acceptance? Missing one.
Yeah.
I think it's denial, anger, and then acceptance.
Anger.
I was gonna say anger.
Right. So yeah, Jacob, I think you're spot on here with that question. It's the Christian subtext is definitely part of the prominence here. I would argue. Here's a question going along with this idea of the Christian subtext. Let's segue over into talking about the ending of this a little bit, right? The ending. So I told you guys the other day that in medieval romance, the last part is called reintegration, right? At the end of the medieval romance, society has to be whole again, right? Society is healed. They always have happy endings, right? You're not going to have Sir Gawain die at the end. That's just not how a medieval romance works. But I do pose this question to some of you, to all of you. Is the ending really a happy ending here? Because Sir Gawain does feel shame, right, at being tempted, at being fearful of losing his life, right? He even carries around the girdle as a sign of dishonor, right, that he was tempted, that he wasn't perfect.
I think that I honestly don't understand his shame though. To be fair, but I do find it I find it neat, for lack of a better word, that he ends up making a baldric out of it. It's like a satchel worn over your shoulder and around your your torso, and the rest of the knights of the Round Table also participate in that, and they wear it to honor him. Basically, I guess so he is an individualized.
Right.
I think that bit of shame that he had, and really the fault at not being able to face his punishment, I guess, with total bravery, I think that is kind of reminiscent of how all humans sin. And, especially as Dell said, I think it was Dell, how this piece would have been a big testament to the youth at the time of Christianity and of those values. I think to me that was a bit of reassurance, and the way that people really didn't hold that against Gawain kind of reminded me of how Jesus forgives all. How even if you sin, as long as you hold yourself to the highest standard possible and you do your very best, you can be forgiven.
I totally get what you're saying. I just a question to all of you: what are his sins at the end of this tale? I don't see any. The only thing that I could see him having fault with is the fact that the Green Knight kind of goads him into flinching, if y'all remember. And then, he braces himself and takes the next one without flinching. But that's the only thing as far as character-wise that, you know what I mean? Now, it's interesting. On line 2497, it mentions the ladies' lovemaking. I'd like to have a little bit more context on that. They never really did make love. Now, she did tempt him, and I think they exchanged a couple kisses, but,
I think in that subtext, I think that's what it literally means, right? Yeah, that doesn't insinuate that they did anything, right? That's the courtly love thing I was alluding to.
Hey, real quick, one more thing. Do y'all think he did any frolicking with the peasants, if you will, the handmaidens of the castle? Because if I might have read that wrong, but it seemed like it kind of alluded to it a few times. And was that okay back then, as long as he didn't sleep with the lord of the house's wife? The rest of them were fair game.
I don't know, thoughts on this question? Do you think anything might have happened there?
I really am not sure. I think I had honestly skimmed over that and not paid much attention to it. But looking back on it, it's a very interesting detail in the story. And I feel that can play into, at that time, peasants were viewed a bit less than high society. And I think it really comes down to, do you think they would have viewed it as much of a sin to do something with them as it would have been to do something with a woman of, I don't know, I don't think standard's the word. I'm under a woman of position, I suppose.
Yeah, an aristocrat. I think you're right on. I think they treated it differently. I would assume.
Well, in the Middle Ages, there was this idea called the Great Chain of Being. Right, this is a good time to bring this concept up because it's going to keep coming up. But it was this idea that we live in a hierarchical universe, from God all the way down to the lowest bacteria, right? So like we in the hierarchy, we start with God. Then like we get to angels, and there's different subdivisions of angels, right? There's like archangels, there's cherubs, which are lesser types of angels, right? There's lots more divisions than that. But then we get down to people, right? So we have the king, the aristocrats, then the peasants, right? So the peasants were viewed as being lesser than the nobles. So if you wanted to use that lens in answering that question, arguably so, right? It wouldn't have been as looked down on to have been with them as it would be this noble lady of the court. But even that concept extends down to animals, right? You have the most noble animals, like the lions, right? And then you get down to like the snakes, right? So it's a how hierarchical universe, and that's how they viewed it in the Middle Ages. Somebody was going to say something.
I just, as you were saying, the hypocrisy in that is unsurpassed.
On the note of hypocrisy, if you think about it, we've deducted that it would have been seen as a lesser sin for Gawain to get with a peasant than a woman of society or an aristocrat. But if you think, women would have been held to a different standard. For them to have gotten with someone at a lower station than them would probably been seen as absolutely terrible and would have darkened their what's the word, reputation, and been a permanent smudge on them, metaphorically.
If they sullied their chastity.
Especially with someone that was a peasant.
Yeah, you didn't, as far as marriages and stuff goes, you really didn't see many men marrying below their station as far as class goes. Maybe frolicking around might have been different, right? As far as especially marriage, I would say it wouldn't have happened much. So the whole love overcomes class and all of that stuff, that probably wasn't very close to reality in the Middle Ages. It's very rare that a female would ascend in class based on marriage. Dale, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's troubling times right now, but at least we've progressed beyond that barbarianism, is how I describe it. It's a really lackluster way to. It's a bad ideology overall, but it's a product of their times, like you said earlier.
Well, it's not as, even England and medieval Europe, even they aren't as hardcore as a lot of other societies. Like even today, if you look at India, right? India still lives in a caste system, right? That means there's no mobility in classes, right? If you're born a peasant, you're never not going to be a peasant, right? If you're born in a sort of a noble, you're never not going to be a noble, right? They're very rigid.
What type of government do they have?
That's a good question. I think they've moved on to more of a parliamentary type of government, right? So, but again, you still have like the House of Lords, right, who mostly has the power.
And I was going to say, we are so lucky to be Americans in that respect, because if you look at England, even though, you don't have the aristocracy and you don't have the peasants, there's still influence from those old names and from those old lords and whatnot, and they cannot escape that. But we, by coming over here, even though, we've done some atrocious things and we still need to atone for those things, and our country isn't what it could be, we've still escaped a lot of that.
I hope y'all don't think I'm coming off as lesser than as far as my nationality, but I would argue that there's still class prejudice to this day in this country. Maybe just not as bad as it used to be in others.
Oh, no, I agree completely. It's still here. If you look at it, we demonize the poor so much. I mean, people, especially in this state, even though we are all poor in comparison to the rest of the country, you still have someone here who might have a nicer house than their neighbor, who looks at them and thinks they're a dirtbag or a thief or an addict, when they might not even be. And also the demonization of addicts, who are I'm trying to think of the word. Shoot. They're kind of a device of the country, of the monetary situation here, the economic situation here. They're a product of that. Although I wouldn't remove all accountability, I would say we still should be accountable for our actions, but we should look further as far as what influences could have furthered that jump and that kind of descent.
Yeah, Dale, going off your point, all you got to do is go to an airport, right, to see that class still divides us to an extent, right? Not just the first class, but even like the higher ticket you pay for, the sooner you get on the plane, right?
Yeah, you get called to board sooner.
Right.
I never thought about that, but you're right. That's pretty wild.
All you gotta do to tell the classes of things, go to the airport. That's all it needs to be said there.
And also with in light of the recent stock market, there's another thing you can look at. The wealthy control the markets and have for as long as it's been a thing.
Yeah, the news that came up a week or two ago about GameStop.
Yeah, my brother got involved on that. I wish I would have.
Yeah,
He bought AMC shares. It wasn't with GameStop.
these brokerage companies refuse to even allow you to buy any more of the stock, forcing the stock price to go back down. Right?
Yeah, Robinhood. Well, come to find out, one of their main investors was a prominent hedge funds manager, so it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Do we know if the people who bought the GameStop stocks are still sitting on it, or if they've sold yet? Because I know that was the next big thing for them.
The price has gone down by like 90% or something since its height. So yeah, people have been selling it. So it's still worth a pretty penny, but not as much. Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation though, because in a British lit class, you can't not get away with talking about class, right? Because it is something very important to the British, even today. Right? It's still very important to them. It's not as like I said, they're not as crazy as India, right? But I'm not to sound like I'm ragging on India, right? That's the values that they've had for thousands of years. But
You think if we focus a little bit more on civics and social studies in school nowadays, it would help out some of these preconceived notions a lot of people have? I just feel like they're not really brought to light about it, except for what they see in social media. I don't even think they teach civics anymore.
My senior civics class was mainly about the Declaration of Independence and the presidents that we've had up until now. And other than that, we really didn't go over much. Any knowledge that I have on things like that, I've had to search for myself and research myself.
Yeah, my senior year civics class I don't really even remember anything we talked about. So,
Yeah, that's a shame. It's commendable that y'all research that on your own to try to self-learn, but that's sad that we can't even somewhat properly teach that.
however, I do believe that if the students that were in that class would have showed a little bit of interest, then maybe the teacher, like he knows his stuff. Like I have talked to him like after class and stuff, and like he really does know his stuff and he's very passionate about it. But if like the students weren't interested, so he didn't want to waste his time.
Right. No, I wasn't faulting the teachers. My entire family's teachers, so I would never do that.
Right. Yeah, I didn't take it like that when you said what you said, but like I was just describing like how our school kind of worked. Like if the students aren't interested, then the teachers don't want to waste their time.
That's how it was at mine as well. I think that the root of that, I know it won't be for everyone. I don't want to generalize, but I think that the root of that could be a lot of younger people have a hard time relating the things you learn in civics to the real world today, especially around here. Because in my civics class, we started, a very long time ago, the beginning of America, the Declaration of Independence. Though that is very, very important to learn, I wish that they had better ways of relating it to today, even though it is still relevant today, by all means.
Apologies for completely sidetracking this discussion.
No, that's fine. I would add to that by saying that I can say this because I was a history major in college. Okay, so I have the right to say this. Right, but I think a lot of people who teach social studies in the K-12 system don't get into it because they want to teach social studies. A lot of them get into it because they want to be coaches, things of that nature. Right, so you don't really get a lot of very passionate teachers on the subject sometimes. Right. So I think that's a safe claim to make.
Yeah, I think it's spot on too. The only thing I would ask you too is the curriculum to blame a little bit too?
Well, that's complicated. When you have a college history class, most of the time it's not ideological like that. Um, I'm not going to say always. I even know I'm not I'm I'm not going to speak ill of any of my colleagues here at Southern, but I know even some of our history teachers here at Southern are very traditional narrative, right? Um, but if most of the time, if you go to the university, it's not the teachers give fair views. I think of a full picture. So, but I think when you get to the county level, the curriculum that they have at the board level, right? I think that that's probably partly responsible too.
A question to add to this: do you all think that something that could play a part in that would be a bit of the passiveness that our youth in America show towards our country? Because if you think about it, even while you're in high school, you don't play an active role in local government. You really don't learn much about it. Like, I didn't know who our mayor was when I was in high school. I didn't care. I didn't think about things like that. And, you know, a lot of times in our youth today, even when they're at the age to vote, they still don't, because I guess the importance of it hasn't gotten through to them. And they haven't really embraced that aspect yet, and the bit of influence that they do have.
Well, I don't know if this is for sure or not. Like, I ain't into politics or not, but I'm pretty sure in the younger vote, there was a lot more younger people that went out and voted this time than like before.
Mm-hmm. Biggest
So
election in
There's
history.
a lot of reasons for that, though. That talking about complicated. Now that's complicated. There's a lot of reasons for people voting this time.
Yeah, it's all interesting stuff. The fact that we're even talking about history in this class just goes to show you that English, that history and literature are very intertwined, right? You can't really talk about one without talking about the other. Um, some English professors would disagree with me on that, but I'm definitely of that mindset. You can't talk about one without talking about the other.
One more question: do you all think that in this text the aristocracy was glorified a little bit, as far as being very religiously pure, I suppose, I guess you would say? And do you think that that would have been propaganda at the time?
I'm not sure, but the knights, I mean, they were held to high esteem. I mean, they were the aristocracy. If you think about it, they were the upper class.
Yeah, there wasn't real. I would argue, yes, Nicole. There really wasn't a lot of texts about the poor, right? There's some exceptions, like if you look in their text, there's a story that's often taught in a class like this called Piers the Plowman. So that's there. When we talk about the Canterbury Tales on Wednesday, you'll see that Chaucer told his stories through the lens of all classes. Right, so that's an interesting thing. For the most part, these nobles and knights, that's who the stories were told about. Right, nobody cared about what the peasants were doing. I'd like to bring the conversation back to the point we went to earlier. Dale asked earlier, did Sir Gawain actually commit a sin? Right? I don't think we ever came to a full answer to that point of our conversation. Um, my answer to that, Dale, would have been he showed a lack of faith there, right? It's this self-preservation. It's this self-preservation to save his own skin, and that overcame his trust in God and all that.
In which act are you referring to?
Close to the end, the fact that he still feels shame, right?
No, I was saying, is it in the fact that he accepted the girdle, or the fact that he flinched from the death blow?
The fact that he accepted the girdle, right? Yeah, that was what, and the death blow too, right? But the fact that that self-preservation instinct overcame his fear of his trusting God and all that good stuff, right? So that was his one sin, right? I don't know. Now that I put that out there, do you still conceive of it as a sin, or would you maybe just a?
I'll be curious what a Christian would think about that. Is that could that even be considered a modern sin, or is that just a a basic uh, mortally challenged individual? That's a common fear with humans.
Right.
I'm not currently super involved in church, but for about 3 years, I was very devout as far as not even allowing myself to think negative things of people. And at that time, yeah, I viewed any kind of fail in faith as a sin. I viewed fear itself, because what my friend who had, got me into the church had said is that if you fear anything, if you any kind of fear of anything, whether it be like ghosts, or whether it be financial crisis, whether it be sickness, any kind of fear shows a failure in faith. That's what I was taught. So I guess from my perspective, in a way, yes.
Yeah, I appreciate your input. I just can't wrap my head around it. I just really can't. I have a hard time with it.
Oh, looking back, I don't feel that way now, but then at that time, that was very much pushed on us. If you were afraid of anything, it was thought that your faith was lacking and that you needed to make up for that, that you didn't trust God completely. But now I look back and, fear is a natural thing.
It is. That's so true. And as a Christian, like that is completely, in church and everything. I believe that fear is a natural thing, and that it is pretty much impossible to completely trust someone, even someone that you can see. And as far as so I wanted to touch on this a minute ago, but we were talking about civics and stuff. But even Jesus was tempted, but in my opinion, it's what you do with that temptation that truly matters. And because Gawain, he didn't fulfill that temptation, that's what saved him from dying in the end. And so as far as fear goes, yeah, I definitely think that fear is a natural thing. And I don't know if that would have been, I don't know if I would consider that a sin, but I do know that you need to trust God and trust that he's going to take care of you and, stuff like that. So that's where I stand with it.
Right. I agree with Kelsey. Being tempted in itself isn't a sin. It's whether you fall into that or not that I think would be where it would be considered a sin. I don't think that him being fearful would necessarily be considered a sin itself.
Right. And if you think about it, Jesus was tempted when he was in the wilderness. So, but he didn't follow through with that temptation. And that's what kept him from sinning. If you follow through on a temptation, that's sin. But if you don't, then it's not. You're allowed to be tempted. It's what you do with that temptation that matters.
I appreciate y'all's input on Christianity. I've been a lifelong looking at it and curious about it. You know what I mean? Its principles and ways and this, that, and the other. I've got family that are. My uncle's a preacher, so I've always found it curious, and I appreciate y'all's input. I really do.
Yeah, the way the story ends too is very Catholic in its nature, right? Because you guys all know up until a certain point in this class, Catholics all we have, right? There's no Baptists or Presbyterians or anything like that until way later in the class. But Gowan at the end too, the fact that he does show off the girdle is his penance, right? Catholics believe in paying penance for your sins. You just don't just ask for forgiveness and it's all over, right? You have to pay penance. So that's part of what's going on here at the end too. Penance isn't necessarily a Protestant thing, like a Christianity that's prominent here, right? You don't really do penance and confession and things like that the Catholics value. So again, it's a different branch of Christianity that we're dealing with here too. I would add that to the conversation.
When it mentions Brutus here at the end of the story, is that the Julius Caesar's Brutus, or is that a different Brutus?
No, that's a different Brutus. I'm pretty sure that Brutus is one of the people who founded the English England in the myth, right? So just like how Aeneas founds Rome, I think Brutus is who founds England. I might be wrong about that. I'll double check. I'm pretty sure that's who that's alluding to. Not the Brutus of Julius Caesar. I'll double check because I might be wrong about that.
It's interesting how they bring up Troy too, because we don't have proof of that being a thing, right? It's a myth.
They actually discovered ruins. I could be wrong, but we had to watch a history documentary for class, and it mentioned that they actually discovered ruins of a place that very well could have been Troy.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. They have it's in like modern Turkey. That's kind of like where the ruins were found.
Yeah, I know they've always speculated. They thought that's around the area they thought it'd be if they did find it. Thought it was interesting they mentioned Hector in here too. You know, he's always portrayed as the defender of Troy.
Yeah, we can't make the case here like we did with Beowulf that this text wasn't influenced by the classics from Greece and Rome. Right? Beowulf, we can make the case it wasn't. Right, but this one is pretty clear that ancient Greek Rome stuff is there.
Like the Iliad and Homer's Odyssey.
Right. Yeah, the Iliad's all about the Trojan War and Hector versus Achilles and all that good stuff. Very good. We got through two very prominent texts in medieval lit. So we've only got one more to cover in medieval lit, and then we're going to move on to Renaissance, early modern lit, I should say. I'm very much of the mind that yes, I think you guys can see that there was lots of interesting stuff happening in the Middle Ages, right? It wasn't this completely dark age that people make it out to be. Right? You can't come up with a story like this if it's completely dark age. Right? I would say.
The fact that someone had time to sit down and write this, and that people had time to talk about this, shows that they prospered a little bit, maybe not a lot, but you know, they weren't working so constantly that they weren't able to create literature or art.
I very much agree with you there. Anytime somebody calls it the dark age, right? I'm not too passionate about the subject, but like I agree with medievalists here. Right? I do think that's a bad way of looking at it. So yeah, we got one more big text, the Canterbury Tales. Enjoy the Wife of Bath's Tale for Wednesday. She is this character that you're going to read about is this very much a sort of proto-feminist icon, right? So one of the questions I want to give you for Wednesday is actually, is she like a proto-feminist, or is she just this monster almost, right? That people would have been fearful of, right? So she's gonna give this whole story about her life, and then she's gonna tell a medieval romance at the end, right? The story about her life is actually longer than the medieval romance. Right? We'll talk about that. So great text. It always inspires debate. I think we're going to have a really great class on Wednesday. Okay. So after that, like I said, we'll be moving into Renaissance about a week or two from now. And once we're done with Chaucer too, I'm going to give you guys your first paper topic about anything, some of these medieval stuff we've dealt with. All right, so good class today. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Good class.